Hi, my name is Mary, and in today's video I'm going to be sharing with you the top 10 fiction books that I read in 2019. This has been a massive reading year for me. I have read quite a few books and some really excellent ones at that. So with that being said, I wanted to narrow it down to my top 10 for fiction. I have the non-fiction component linked in my comment section down below if you're interested in that one as well. But for the purposes of this, I have put them roughly in order of my preference, of my favorite things that I have read, but it was really difficult. So without further ado, let's get into the books. Number 10, I just put it up and completely flubbed the title. That is this book, The 7.5 Deaths of Evelyn. Hardcastle, not Evelyn Hugo. Those two need to sort this out because these titles are too much. Anyway, this is by Stuart Turton. This is a book that I read very early in the year and knew that I would love, and I did love it, and I love that. I love when you know that you're going to enjoy something. This book is a murder mystery. It takes place in a scenario in which a man finds himself trapped in the body of a different person. He has amnesia, he doesn't know why this has happened, but he's woken up in this man's body, and then he starts to manifest himself in the bodies of different people in the course of a single day at a party at this house where a woman named Evelyn Hardcastle will be murdered at 11 o'clock. So he has to use the different perspectives of these people to come to terms with not only try to solve the mystery, but also come to terms with why this is happening to him, why he has been trapped in this scenario. Evelyn Hardcastle, which I keep getting confused with Evelyn Hugo, but Evelyn Hardcastle is such an interesting character, and I find just the setting and the mood of this fabulous. I haven't felt fandom-y about books in a long time, but this is a book where I just wanted to look at aesthetic boards on Pinterest and stuff like that about this book because the mood of it is so compelling and so great. It's not perfect, so it's at number 10, but it was definitely one of my top reads of the year. Next is The Handmaid's Tale by Margaret Atwood. This is a book which I had been meaning to read for quite some time because it is sort of a modern classic, and yet I had never read it, and so I read it this year, and it was really good. So I should preface this by saying that for a long time, starting in my middle school years, my favorite book of all time was Brave New World, and Brave New World by Aldous Huxley is a dystopian novel which has a lot to do with reproductive rights, and as a young kind of pro-choice feminist middle schooler, I was very compelled by this novel. In retrospect, I haven't read it in a while. I don't know if it would hold up. We'll see. But anything that gives me that kind of vibe, a dystopian novel that deals with reproductive rights, I feel myself compelled to enjoy. But this book went beyond that. I really enjoyed the way that this novel was set up. I loved the ending of the novel. I found it compelling. I have not read the Testaments yet. I'm not sure if I will get to that next year or not. I have a lot of reading plans, and it's not something that I'm super eager to read, but I really enjoyed this book, and I think it is a timely thing for people to be reading. The next book that I want to talk about is this one, Notes of a Crocodile by Miajin. This is translated by Bonnie Hui. This is a book about two young women who are at a university and they are having a romantic relationship that then they have to put on hold, but then they want to start it again, and there's a lot of lesbian pining in it, which I do enjoy in my novels. But it's also got this side plot about crocodiles, who are a species who are human but are not, and humans discover them and they become obsessed by these crocodiles. And so this book does an excellent job of kind of keeping you guessing about where these two seemingly completely disconnected plots, how they're going to relate to one another. It is a short read, it's an easy read. I would recommend this for Pride Month reading. I would recommend this for somebody who's interested in reading more international and translated literature, and I would just recommend reading it because it's very, very good. Number 7 is The Red Tent by Anita Diamant. This is a book which expounds upon the story of a Dinah who is mentioned in a single sentence in the book of Genesis in the Bible. She's one of the daughters of Jacob. But it expands and tells her story in a full life about what it was like in the biblical era to live as a woman. This is a book which I think is well worth the read. I don't get terribly... There are some women who find the whole motherhood not just being a mother, but like motherhood as like an archetype, as a story arc and a narrative and an identity, extremely compelling. They get very into it. I'm not one of those people. I have no plans to be a mother, never wanted to be a mother, and I feel that does not connect me to womanhood, basically. It has no connection for me. However, I was so compelled by this novel. It made me cry. I was so interested in it because there's so much in here that's wrapped up in womanhood, but it's also just wrapped up in cultural identity and family identity. And there's characters in here that I found extremely compelling that I really wanted to keep reading about. So this book is short, but it's definitely stuck with me. This was an early success of the year, and I haven't read anything else by Anita Diamant, but maybe it's time I pick something else up by her as well. Number 6, I've talked about a little bit on this channel before. That is this one, A Gentleman in Moscow by Amor. This is a book about Count Rostov, who is a count who has been assigned to house arrest in a hotel where he has been staying in Russia when the Communist Revolution takes over, and he is stripped of his aristocratic titles. And it follows his life in this hotel over the course of a number of years as he adjusts. And what I thought would be a powerful and sad novel turned out to be one of the most hopeful novels that I have read in a long time. This book, I think, has beautiful meditations in it, and it is a person who does not allow their circumstances to negatively impact the way that they exist in the world, and I really enjoyed this one. This, I think, is in production to be a miniseries. Don't quote me on that, but I think it is, and I think it will be a magnificent miniseries. The next book that I want to talk about, my number 5 favorite of the year, was this one, Infideles by Abdellah. I read this for my challenge of reading a book from every country because Abdellah is from Morocco, and this is a tiny, short novel that nevertheless packs a punch. It's about a young man growing up in Morocco, and about his mother as well. As she grows up, she becomes almost like a sexual expert, who is hired by families to teach the newly married couples how to have sex in a culture where that's not something that's conveyed by the parents. And she's kind of talked about like she's a witch, and so she has this relationship with her spirituality that is compelling in and of itself, but then this impacts on her son, who is a young man who grows up and kind of fixates on this other young man who is interested in terrorism. And this is a sad novel. It's upsetting, but it's so good, and I love the way that it's written. It is written in this kind of staccato, short, choppy style, and I just found it perfect for conveying the story. There's not a lot of like long prose, there's not a lot of description of scenes. It's very direct in what it wants to do, and I think by doing that, it becomes even better. This is one of my favorite things that I have read for my challenge of reading a book from every country, and it's part of why I want to continue to do that challenge. Number 4 on my list is Stone Butch Blues by Leslie Feinberg. This is a classic lesbian novel. It is all about the butch and femme scenes in the 1950s, which Feinberg also grew up in and developed in these scenes. It is a meditation on gender. Obviously, a simple understanding of lesbianism holds that it's women attracted to other women, which is true, but because so much of womanhood is tied up in heterosexuality, there is a long-standing tradition of lesbians who don't feel aligned to womanhood at all, and butchness is a manifestation of that, and I think feminist is to a certain extent as well. And this is a sad novel. It is a triggering and upsetting novel, but reading it, I have never felt more connected to characters and their struggles just on the basis of the way that they look at the world and the way that they feel about their own identities and their own selves. It's a classic for a reason, and I think it's well worth the read if that's something that interests you and you can handle the more upsetting subject matter. I want to start reading more books, like sapphic books and books by lesbians and classic books of that persuasion, and that's definitely something that's also on my list of things to keep in mind for Pride Month this coming year. We're almost at the end of the list. Number 3 for me is A Brief History of 7 Killings by Marlon James. This is a book which takes different perspectives of people who are living in Jamaica around the time of the attempted assassination of Bob Marley in the 1970s. There is something powerful in this book. It's a little magical realism, it's a little mystery, it's a little cultural study. But what I love about it, and what Marlon James does better than most other novelists that I know, is that he can take characters from different backgrounds and make their voices sound so entirely distinct and different. It's not just the dialect, although there is that as well. It's the things that they talk about, the things that they think are important, the things that they focus on. And this is a masterpiece of that. It's a chunky and thick book, but don't let that dissuade you. It was the winner of the Man Booker Prize, according to the sticker on here, and I want to read more Marlon James, so this is definitely one of my top picks of the year. I think it's something that more people should probably read if they're interested in either magical realism or in these kind of multi-narrator stories. Number 2 on my list is also my favorite historical fiction of the year. That is Wolf Hall by Hilary Mantel. This book is about Thomas Cromwell. He is a man who has no aristocratic background, but who nevertheless climbs in the court of Henry VIII. He begins as kind of Cardinal Wolsey's man, and then just goes on from there to become so powerful and influential. The reason that I love this book is because I think that this period of history is very overexposed in historical fiction. That's not a bad thing. It doesn't mean that people have to stop writing in it. It just means that a lot of people do. But this stands out to me. The reason that it stands out is that Hilary Mantel is actually able to write characters that feel like they are from the past. Thomas Cromwell doesn't feel like a modern man. He feels like a character from history that has just kind of leapt into the book and then off the book again. I think that it's beautiful. I think that it's so interesting that she's able to do this when so many other people can only write sympathetic characters if they make them seem more modern as opposed to historical characters. I am so excited for the 3rd book in this trilogy to come out, I think in March of 2020. I will probably do a wrap-up of the entire series once I have read that one. My last favorite of the year will come as no surprise to anybody because it's my favorite book of all time that I read for the first time this year. That is The Goldfinch by Donna Tartt. I will be honest with you, Donna Tartt is a bit of a booktube darling, and I did not like The Secret History. I chose to pick up The Goldfinch after I had read The Secret History because I knew that the subject matter would be interesting to me, and I was hoping that that would rescue it for me and that maybe I'd get a nice 4-star read out of the thing. And it became my favorite book of all time. The reason that I feel that way is that this is a book which meditates on a couple of themes which I find very interesting. Our lead character, Theodore Decker, is going to the Metropolitan Museum of Art with his mother when a terrorist explosion happens in the first chapter. As he is leaving the wreckage, his mother has died, but he picks up a painting and carries it with him. This follows Theodore Decker as he carries this painting throughout his life and uses it as almost a surrogate to be with his mother, and then how he is lost without this moral compass, how he has to find his own way in the world, knowing that his mother is gone and that she's not going to be able to guide him anymore. It's about the relationships that he forms with other people, and also the continuing relationship that he has with the painting. It has some of the best meditations on art that I've read in recent memory, the best meditations on what it means to be human and a good person at the same time. I really loved this book, and I promise I will stop talking about it soon, but I have a few more videos to get through first where I'm pretty sure it's going to come up. Alright, thank you very much for watching. Please let me know what were your favorite books of the year, or if there's any books on this list that you're hoping to read in 2020. Thank you very much for watching. Bye!